The first thing I found in my new apartment was a child's tooth, nestled in the dust behind the radiator. It was small, yellowed, and felt unnaturally cold. I should have taken it as a sign, but in my defense, I was desperate. The rent for a 2-bedroom on the edge of the state forest was obscenely cheap, and after the divorce, obscenely cheap was all I could afford. The town of Pinesgrove wasn't much to look at. A gas station, a diner that closed at 7 p.m., and rows of houses that seemed to hunch their shoulders against the constant whisper of the pines. People kept to themselves. The only time I saw any real community spirit was in the lead-up to Halloween. Pumpkins appeared on every stoop, cheap synthetic cobwebs were strewn over bushes, and the town's few kids talked excitedly about trick-or-treating. It felt normal, almost wholesome. The first sign something was wrong wasn't a sound but a smell. A week after I moved in, the scent of old earth and rotten mushrooms began to seep from the vents. I cleaned them, changed the filter, but the smell persisted. It was the smell of a deep forest floor, a place sunlight never touched. Then the dream started. I'd dream of a house. Not just any house, but a hut that stood on giant chicken legs, spinning slowly in a moonlit clearing. It was surrounded by a fence made of human bones, and skulls atop the posts watched me with hollow, knowing eyes. From within, I'd hear a dry, rhythmic scraping, like a pestle grinding in a mortar. I'd wake up with the taste of dirt in my mouth. I mentioned the smell to my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, an old woman who'd lived in Pinesgrove her whole life. She went very still. "That's the smell of Baba Yaga's woods," she said, her voice a dry leaf rustle. "She doesn't like her things being taken from." "Who?" I asked, thinking it was some local eccentric. "The Witch of the Wood. The stories say she owned all this land once. She doesn't care for deeds or paperwork. She believes in older agreements. A life for a life, a tooth for a tooth." She looked pointedly at my apartment. "Some say she's still collecting rent." I laughed it off. A folktale. But that night, the scraping sound from my dreams was in my waking world. A faint, insistent scratching at my front door. I didn't open it. I spent the night on the couch, a kitchen knife in my hand, listening to it travel around the perimeter of my home. On Halloween night, the tension broke. I was handing out candy to a handful of ghosts and superheroes when I saw her. At the edge of the tree line, just beyond the glow of my porch light, stood a figure so impossibly thin and tall, she seemed to be made of sticks and shadows. Her nose was long and hooked, scraping against her chin. She stood in a mortar, holding a pestle like a staff, and she was looking right at me. She raised a bony finger and pointed, not at me, but at my door, at my home. The children on my porch fell silent. One little girl dressed as a butterfly dropped her candy bucket. A single baby tooth rolled out onto the welcome mat. The world snapped back into motion. The kids fled, screaming. I slammed my door shut, locking every bolt. The scratching began again, but this time it was louder, more impatient. It was at every window, every wall at once. The whole house was surrounded. The smell of rot and earth was overwhelming. I backed into the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs. And that's when I saw it. On my kitchen table, where nothing had been before, lay a small, crude doll. It was made of mud and sticks with 2 beads for eyes. And stuck in its mouth was a single human tooth. It was a message, a receipt. I finally understood. The cheap rent wasn't a bargain. It was a down payment. The previous tenant had left, and Baba Yaga had come to collect what was owed. She wasn't asking for money. She was taking her tribute, her share, a tooth for the tooth she'd left behind. The scratching stopped. A profound silence fell. I knew she was gone. For now. The rent had been paid, but Halloween comes every year, and landlords always come back to collect. My brother Mark was always an idiot. A lovable idiot, but an idiot nonetheless. He thought a survival weekend in the Pinesgrove State Forest right before Halloween would be a great way to find himself. He didn't find himself. He found something else. He'd been gone for 48 hours when the search parties started. I joined them, my heart a cold stone of dread in my chest. The forest was ancient, a sprawling sea of pine and oak that seemed to swallow sound and light. The rangers said it was easy to get turned around. The old-timers in town just shook their heads. They called the forest Leshy's domain. Leshy is the master of the wood, Mrs. Gable told me, her eyes grave. She'd become my reluctant source for local nightmare fuel. He's a trickster. He looks like a giant man made of moss and bark with leaves for hair. He protects the animals and misleads men. If he takes a liking to you, he might just lead you in circles until you lose your mind. If he dislikes you, he leads you off the path forever. We searched for days, drones, dogs, volunteers, nothing. It was as if the forest had opened up and swallowed him whole. Hope was dying. Then on the morning of Halloween, I got a call. It was Mark's phone. All I could hear was heavy, ragged breathing and a strange echoing sound like wind through a hollow log. Then a voice, but it wasn't Mark's. It was deep, guttural, like the sound of roots breaking through stone. It spoke only 2 words. "He's mine." The call dropped. The police traced the ping to a remote part of the forest not on any of our search grids. A smaller team, me, 2 rangers and a police officer, headed in. The air changed as we walked. The birdsong died. The colors seemed to bleed from the world, leaving everything in muted shades of gray and green. The GPS on our phones flickered and died. Our compasses spun lazily, uselessly. We found his campsite. The tent was shredded, not by an animal, but as if it had been caught in a whirlwind of thorns. His supplies were scattered. And there, in the soft mud by a creek, were footprints. One set was Mark's hiking boots, stumbling, dragging. The other was massive, long and narrow, with deep gouges for claws. We followed the trail. It should have been impossible. It led us up a sheer rock face we had to climb, through a thicket of brambles that left us bleeding, and yet the prints never wavered. It was as if the path was being laid out just for us. We were being led. We found him at dusk, in a clearing we hadn't seen on any map. Mark was on his hands and knees, staring at the ground. He was emaciated, shivering, his clothes in tatters. He didn't look up as we called his name. Standing behind him was Leshy. He was 9 feet tall, a shifting, living mound of moss, bark, and shadow. Antlers like a stag's crown sprouted from his head, tangled with vines. His eyes were 2 pools of absolute blackness, and when he turned them on us, a primal fear, older than humanity, locked my joints. This was the forest. This was its soul, and it was angry. The creature didn't move. It just watched us. One of the rangers raised his rifle, but the officer gently pushed the barrel down. This wasn't a fight we could win. The Leshy's voice filled our minds, not our ears. It was the creak of a dying tree, the rustle of 1,000 leaves. He harmed my children. He set traps. He took what was not his to take. He is mine to judge. My brother, in a moment of stupid macho pride, had been poaching. He'd bragged about it to me in a text. He'd trespassed in the most profound way possible. I fell to my knees. I didn't know what to say. I just pleaded. I poured every ounce of my fear and love for my idiot brother into that silent plea. The Leshy stared for an eternity. Then he gestured with a hand of gnarled wood. Mark collapsed. The creature turned and simply melted back into the trees, becoming one with the shadows until there was nothing there. We carried Mark out. He never speaks of what happened. He just wakes up screaming night after night, whispering about the Green Man and the endless shifting paths. He won't go near a park, let alone a forest. He's a broken man. The doctors say it's psychosis from trauma and exposure, but I know the truth. We made a trade that night. The Leshy didn't take his life. He took his sanity. He left the shell of my brother but kept his mind forever wandering in those deep, dark woods. And sometimes, on Halloween night, if I listen very closely by my window, I can hear the distant sound of laughter, like dry leaves skittering across pavement, and I know the master of the wood is still laughing at his joke. After my brother's ordeal, I started having nightmares about water. Not waves, but still black water. I'd see a face staring back at me, but it wasn't my own. It was bloated and green, with eyes like stagnant pools and a mouth full of reeds. My therapist said it was secondary trauma. Mrs. Gable, when I described it, paled and crossed herself. "That's the Vodyanoy," she whispered. "The old man of the lake, he drowns men and keeps their souls in porcelain jars. He's been hungry lately." Pinesgrove's reservoir was the town's crown jewel, but it had a history. Old villages were drowned to create it decades ago. Church steeples, it was said, could still be seen during droughts. And lately, there had been drownings. 3 in the last year. Accidents, the report said. Men who were strong swimmers found tangled in weeds and water barely 6 feet deep. On Halloween night, I was driving back from getting Mark his prescription. My headlights cut through the thick fog coiling over the reservoir road. That's when I saw him. A little boy in a soaked dinosaur pajama standing in the middle of the road crying. I slammed on the brakes. I jumped out, my heart in my throat. "Hey kid, are you okay?" He looked up, his face pale and dripping. He pointed a trembling finger toward the black water of the reservoir. "He won't let me go," he whispered. "He says I have to bring him more. He's so lonely." I knew this boy. His picture was on a missing persons poster at the post office. Timmy Brandt. He'd fallen out of a fishing boat 6 months ago. They never found the body. Before I could move, a deep, gurgling voice echoed from the lake, a sound like a drowning man trying to speak. A new friend! The fog on the water coalesced, forming a massive, humped shape. It was a man, but made of waterweed, slime, and the detritus of the deep. Water streamed from its matted hair and long beard. Its skin was the color of pond scum, and its eyes glowed with a faint phosphorescent light. The Vodyanoy. It sat upon a half-sunken log, its webbed feet dangling in the water, and it smiled at me with a mouth full of murky water. The little boy beside me began to change. His skin turned green and taut. Water poured from his mouth and eyes. He was no victim. He was a lure. "Join us," the boy gurgled, reaching for me with a swollen, sodden hand. I stumbled back, fell against my car, and scrambled inside, locking the doors. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking too badly to dial. I looked up. They were gone. The boy, the creature. The fog was just fog. The lake was still and black. I reported what I saw. Of course, they didn't believe me. A trauma-induced hallucination, too much stress. But I know what I saw. I moved out of Pinesgrove a week later. I couldn't stay. I live in the desert now, as far from water as I can get. But on rainy nights when water trickles down the window pane, I sometimes see a face in the reflection. It's bloated and green, and it's smiling. It's waiting, because Halloween ends, but some hungers are eternal. The Vodyanoy got a taste for this world again, and he knows I've seen him. He knows I believe, and beings of old dark magic thrive on belief. It's the one thing that makes them real. These are the stories of Pinesgrove, a town where the old world never died. It just learned to hide in the shadows of the new. We shared these tales not just to frighten you, but as a warning. The woods are deep, the water is dark, and some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Thank you for listening. If these stories made you check the locks twice, pay us back with a like and a subscribe. Until next time, stay out of the deep woods.